Ali, Iyakwe, Ekamawir, Omo. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this webinar titled We Champion We, Insights on Pacific Women's Economic Empowerment from the BELUU Stakeholder Mapping. Thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Erin Camille Alviar, Project Coordinator for the BELUU program of Grameen, and I will be your host for this event. This webinar serves as a knowledge-sharing session about the findings of the stakeholder mapping conducted for the Building Economic Inclusion via the Blue Economy, or BELUU initiative. This event also serves as the first activity of our community of practice, through which we will share with you some reflections on women's economic empowerment concerns within the Pacific Islands, mainly in the 4 countries covered by the BELUU program. The BELUU program is implemented by the Grameen Foundation and co-funded and supported by the U.S. Department of State and Taiwan under the auspices of the American Institute in Taiwan and the Taipei Economic Cultural Representative Office, or TECRO, in the United States. Please feel free to leave messages in the chat or Q&A box anytime in the session that you have questions. We will try our best to answer your questions as we go along with the webinar. All contents and recommendations from the stakeholder mapping and what will be presented today are the responsibilities of the Grameen program team and the authors. For the purposes of knowledge sharing, the session is being recorded and the team will share the recording after the session. To kick off this webinar, let us listen to a message from one of our funders, Ms. Regina Neal, Foreign Affairs Officer of the U.S. Department of State, Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues.
Thank you so much, Erin. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to those of us calling from the US or further west. Thank you to everyone for your participation in today's webinar hosted by the Grameen Foundation on women's economic empowerment in the Pacific. As Erin mentioned, my name is Regina Neal, and I am a Foreign Affairs Officer in the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues at the United States Department of State. My office has a mandate to promote the rights and empowerment of women and girls through U.S. foreign policy globally. As I'm sure you'll hear over and over again, the Building Economic Inclusion via the Blue Economy, also known as BELUU project, is implemented by our partner, the Grameen Foundation in the Marshall Islands, Nauru, Palau, and Tuvalu, and is co-funded by the United States and Taiwan under the auspice of the American Institute in Taiwan and the Taipei Economic Cultural Representative Office in the United States, also known as TECRO. I did want to take just a second to acknowledge our colleague here from TECRO. We are grateful to Taiwan for their contribution to BELUU. The United States is proud to work alongside of Taiwan on this project and many others that are advancing economic inclusion and development across the Pacific Islands. The BELUU project aims to contribute to building an enabling environment for women's economic security through supporting women to succeed in their local economies. It's an honor to join you today to underscore just how important this crucial topic of women's economic empowerment in the Pacific Islands is to the United States government. This is not only an issue that resonates locally for you, but also globally for us all. In the Pacific, women are the backbone of their communities, yet they often face disproportionate challenges. UN Women reports indicate that women in the Pacific Islands are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change due to their roles as primary caregivers in their families, limited access to resources, and exclusion from important decision-making processes. In the Pacific region, women's participation in the formal labor force is notably lower than men's, with an estimated 80% of women engaged in the informal sector. This inequality in employment opportunities not only stifles economic growth across the region, but also perpetuates inequalities in men and women's economic security, education, safety, and more. However, amidst all of these challenges, I have to say that progress is evident. Initiatives like BELUU can be the catalyst for change by strengthening economic security through capacity building, coaching, network building, and increasing access to capital for innovative economic activities that support women-led and women-benefiting enterprises and organizations. We acknowledge the invaluable role of Pacific women as custodians of traditional knowledge and culture. Their inclusion in economy is not just a matter of equality, but also essential for the regional, national, and local development and security and sustainability of their societies. The empowerment of women isn't an isolated goal. It's a multiplier of positive change. Studies consistently demonstrate that investing in women yields far-reaching benefits, improving health outcomes, fostering economic growth, and nurturing more resilient communities. As we reflect on these facts and learn more from the stakeholder mapping conducted by the Grameen Foundation and their partners, let us think of ways we can take this information to further the great work many of you are already doing in support of and alongside Pacific women. Let's also start identifying how we can do more to ensure economic opportunities for women across the Pacific Islands are inclusive of women and girls in all their diversity, and ensure that they have equal access to economic opportunities. So with that, thank you again for inviting me to participate today. I'm really looking forward to discussion, and I'll hand it back to Erin. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Regina. Also, thank you to the rest of our colleagues from GV, Atlee, and Lauren for their utmost support since the beginning of the BELUU program. And now, to deliver the message on behalf of our funder at TechRow, may I call on Mr. David Chi Hua-Lin, Sector Chief for Pacific Affairs, Department of East Asian and Pacific Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Good morning from Taipei. Yes. My name is David, and I'm the Section Chief of the Pacific Affairs of the RC Taiwan Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's an honor to join this seminar hosted by Grameen Foundation today, where we come together to showcase our achievements of the BELUU programs. As we know, the goal of this initiative lies in addressing the gender bias issue faced by low-income women in the Pacific Island nations, Palau, Nauru, Tuvalu, and the Marshall Islands. And of course, has yielded fruitful results. And just want to mention that except for the BELUU programs, we also have long programs for empowerment of women in Marshall Islands and in Palau. Those are two separate programs. Yes. And Taiwan acknowledges the contribution of the Grameen Foundation to the BELUU program, and we look forward to ongoing collaborations in the future. We aim to demonstrate Taiwan and the United States' shared commitment to enhancing economic empowerment for women in the Pacific region through continued partnership. Together, we can build on the momentum generated by this program to foster economic empowerment, resilience, sustainable growth for the women and the young entrepreneurs who are at the heart of the blue economy. So lastly, I just want to express my deepest gratitude to the Grameen Foundation for spearheading this impactful program, and also to all of our partners for your dedication to the economic inclusion and empowerment of the Pacific region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Also, thank you to our colleagues from TechRow, Carol and Herbasio, for their support with the innovation grants and technical assistance for the BELUU program. And now, I know that we are quite familiar with Grameen, but to reintroduce Grameen and the work that we do, I'd like to call on Gigi Gatti.
Hello, everyone. Grameen Foundation is a nonprofit organization that uses technology and innovation to transform ecosystems so that women and girls can claim their full power, thereby breaking the cycle of poverty and hunger. We are rooted from the work of Professor Yunus of Bangladesh, and we have been in existence for more than 25 years. Women in low-income countries around the world exhibit extraordinary power. Often they are backbones of their households, doing unending and unpaid work to help their families survive. We are all too familiar with that woman. But entrenched is a gender bias in economic and social systems. The traditions, beliefs, and attitudes that touch every part of women's lives prevent women from fully using power to earn income, gain agency, and resilience. Grameen Foundation invests in the power of women by first identifying where economic and social systems are failing her. And that is the reason why this landscape assessment is a very important one. We then partner with local actors using innovation and digital technologies to transform these systems from the inside out to give her the equitable access she needs to come out of poverty in a very meaningful way. By working with local organizations, especially women-led and community-based organizations, we allow them to lead the way as we listen and support to ensure that whatever we do will be relevant and sustainable for many, many years to come. Thank you so much for joining us today. And at this point, my colleague Kim Bilones will be sharing more about the BELUU project. Over to you, Kim.
Thank you so much, Gigi. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Kim Panunshalman Billones, Senior Program Manager for the BELUU program at Grameen. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with our project, the Building Economic Inclusion via the Blue Economy or BELUU initiative. Please allow me to do a quick recap on BELUU or a brief introduction for those who have not heard of BELUU before. Co-funded and supported by the U.S. Department of State and Taiwan under the auspices of the American Institute in Taiwan and TechRo, the BELUU program focuses on the potential of the lands and resource-rich Pacific Ocean to deepen the market participation and resilience of women entrepreneurs in the 4 Pacific Island countries of Marshall Islands, Palau, Nauru, and Tuvalu. The project's objectives include contributing to the building of an enabling environment for WE by fostering competition and enhancing the capacity of country-level stakeholders from civil society and the private sector. Secondly, to support women to succeed in their local economy by facilitating their access to skills, training, mentorship, and other resources by partnering with active participants in the ecosystem. The BELUU program aims to build an enabling environment for WE and support women to succeed in their local economy. The initiative focuses on the power of the blue and green economies to deepen the market participation of women entrepreneurs in the 4 countries. Grameen identified 4 economic sectors that provide opportunities for women's entrepreneurship to flourish and enable communities to build resilience to climate change as well as other external shocks. These sectors are fisheries, climate-smart and small-scale agriculture, green business and circular economy, and tourism and ecotourism. The BELUU program has many different components that leverage technical assistance at the local, regional, and global levels. Its components include the stakeholder mapping being discussed today, the digital knowledge exchange platform, the community of practice, monitoring, evaluation, and learning activities, and largely the Innovation Grant Fund. The Innovation Grant is an award and funding facility that provides financial and technical assistance to CSOs, women groups, and private sector entities in the 4 countries. The Digital Exchange Empowering the Pacific Region, or DEEPR, is a digital learning and exchange platform that will serve the needs of the BELUU stakeholders in the region by providing open access to relevant technical resources. The Community of Practice, or COP, is a network building initiative where knowledge sharing will be facilitated among key stakeholders who share the same interest, passion, and skills to address we concerns in the Pacific region. Registration for the COP remains open to interested parties working towards we in the Pacific. We'll share the link for the registration later towards the end of the webinar. That would be it from my end for the brief introduction to BELUU, and thank you for listening. I will now pass on the mic to my colleague Bev to share more about the project and the stakeholder mapping activity.
Thanks, Kim. Once again, I am Beverly Brule, Monitoring and Evaluation Lead of Grameen Foundation. In this section, I will share with you the ongoing developments in BELUU and the methodology of the stakeholder mapping. Shinoy and Meitaka will present the findings, specifically the barriers to women's economic empowerment, and which surfaced through a series of dialogues we conducted in the Pacific region and in the 4 countries covered by BELUU. Finally, Kat will share some of our recommendations for harnessing BELUU's 4 economic sectors and championing women's leadership and participation. Next slide, please. Thank you. So where are we now? Presently, we have 24 innovation grant awardees and ongoing applications. All 4 countries have at least 3 grantees, and they all address the different economic sectors of BELUU. Next slide, please. Thank you. We are currently developing a Grameen-hosted website for digital learning and exchange called the Deeper Platform, to ensure accessibility and to bridge the digital divide. We also have deeper hosts in each country, as you can see in the slide. As of today, we have 34 registered community of practice members who come from the 4 countries covered by BELUU. Moving on, we conducted the stakeholder mapping in the Pacific region with various organizations that play a proactive role in the region. We also paid a particular attention to key actors and representatives from each of the countries covered by BELUU. The Marshall Islands, Palau, Nauru, and Tuvalu share similarities but are also unique in their own. They all share a strong connection with their natural environment and its link to their cultures. 3 of the countries, namely the Marshall Islands, Palau, and Nauru, are traditionally matrilineal. The Marshall Islands is made up of coral atolls. It has a long history of colonization and is one of the youngest democracies in the Pacific region and globally. Palau is also another country on the front lines of climate change and the leader in the counteraction to the declining shark populations. Palau is also known for its tourism sector. Nauru is among the world's smallest independent countries. For decades, Nauru exported the highest quality of phosphate, but the phosphate mining industry has significantly impacted the country's natural resources and economy. Tuvalu, also one of the world's smallest countries, is highly vulnerable to climate change, thus considered as sinking islands. In an effort to preserve its culture and safeguard its sovereignty amid rising sea levels, Tuvalu has been in the process of becoming the world's first digital nation. Next slide, please. Of the 57 organizations, you can see that almost half of our mapping participants are from civil society organizations and non-government organizations, which can be attributed to the growing civil society in the 4 countries. Many of these organizations are regarded as women's groups and/or women-led. This is followed by government stakeholders. Many of them are from embassies and diplomatic missions. Then we have participants from the academe and international and regional organizations. Noticeably, the smallest proportion of participants are from the private sector. This may be due to the relatively underdeveloped private sector across the 4 countries. The BELUU team intended to have microfinance institutions or MFIs, as well as micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSMEs as participants in the mapping exercise. However, there was no MFI presence in the 4 countries, and the lack of registered MSME owners' participation was due to the predominance of informal micro businesses in the 4 countries. Next slide, please. The stakeholder mapping analysis adopted this framework, which represents the relationship between the barriers to women's economic empowerment and the opportunities for growth in WE. Essentially, the barriers to WE either facilitate or hinder opportunities for growth in WE. Likewise, opportunities for growth in WE respond or address the barriers to WE. The barriers to WE include structural, cognitive, material, and relational barriers. The barriers or lack thereof shape and are shaped by the opportunities for growth, which includes the 4 economic sectors of BELUU, as well as women's participation and enabling landscape. To expound on the barriers, I'll call on Shenoy and Metaka, our Women's Economic Empowerment Coordinators. Shenoy.
Thank you, Bev. Good morning, everyone. I am Shinoy Amasyol, BELUU's WE coordinator in Palau. I will present the barriers to WE, which we surfaced during the stakeholder mapping activities. I will be joined by Meitaka in the presentation of these barriers. The stakeholder mapping results found cultural, cognitive, material, and relational barriers that hinder women's economic empowerment, or WE. We will go over each of these one by one. The structural barriers includes policies, practices, and other norms that favor an advantaged group while systematically disadvantaging a marginalized group such as women and youth. These specifically include land ownership and labor force participation. In the Pacific region, land ownership and land rights are primarily based on customary laws. Because of the region's affinity to its natural environment, the land is a shared responsibility of the community. But there are also unique contexts on land ownership per country. In the Marshall Islands, while land ownership is based on customary laws, land can also be acquired through inheritance, which follows a complex lineage. In Palau, men inherit the land in accordance with the law, but men alone cannot decide on land use as it is a shared property and thus a shared responsibility of the community. In Nauru, women are traditionally the custodians of the land, but this principle has lost its value over time. In Tuvalu, equal rights on land are not guaranteed. You can observe that women are traditionally the custodians of the land, but this has not been the case for quite some time now. As women marry, they move with their husbands, leaving their family, household, and land. And this weakens their roles as custodians of the land and as a member of their household, families, and communities. Next slide, please. In terms of labor force participation, women have lower labor force participation than men in the region, and this is also true across the 4 countries covered by BELUU. But lower labor force participation of women does not mean that they do not work. It just so happens that there are more women than men in the informal economy. This disparity between women and men can be attributed to persisting gender norms, including the cultural expectation from women to engage in home care work, such as childcare and upkeep. Women's work in agriculture and fisheries sectors is often unrecognized, undercompensated, unpaid, and undervalued compared to men's work, which is often manual labor and is considered a formal work. The cognitive barriers are limitations in knowledge acquisition and transfer of learning that hinder marginalized groups such as women and youth from accessing education. The stakeholder mapping found education and access to business training as a major cognitive barriers in the 4 countries covered by BELUU. Primary education is compulsory in almost all of the Pacific. Secondary education is also compulsory in the Marshall Islands, Palau, and Nauru, but depends on exam performance in Tuvalu. Per country census data shows that there are generally high cross-enrollment rates, or GER, for primary and secondary education. However, completion rates and GER for tertiary education vary. Among the 4 countries, only Palau has more women than men enrolled in tertiary education. In the Marshall Islands and Tuvalu, women are less likely to access education or complete education compared to men. Meanwhile, in Nauru, both women and men have limited access to post-secondary education. The stakeholder mapping revealed that the major challenges in completing education for women include early marriage, teenage pregnancy, and their care responsibilities at home. In terms of access to business training, there is very limited opportunity for business training in local higher educational institutions. Some young professionals travel to countries such as Australia, Fiji, New Zealand, and the US, where there are well-established programs for higher education and vocational training. Now I'll turn over the mic to Meitaka to discuss the 2 other barriers. Thank you.
Thanks, Shinoy. Yaboy, everyone. Greetings, everyone. My name is Meitaka Kendalleka, and I am your BELUU coordinator here in the beautiful Marshall Islands. And I'll be covering the last 2 barriers. So in addition to structural and cognitive barriers, as mentioned by Shinoy, there is also material and relational barriers to women economic empowerment. So for material barriers, we're looking at those that limit access to resources such as goods and services that are really necessary for the development and the participation of women, particularly in the economy and in their societies. So we're looking at material barriers that include, number 1, limited or I would say weak business sector, market channels, as well as number 2, lack of access to finance. So for the first material barrier, which is limited business sector and material channels, here in the Marshall Islands or in the 4 countries, we have a significant underdeveloped private sector, and this is mostly due to lack of major industrial and commercial activities. As you can see, there are about 8 factors listed here. And those include, like I said before, barriers that include underdeveloped private sector. And these are, again, related to lack of major industrial and commercial activities. Also, the remoteness of the island nations means there's high transportation cost. And these are often lead to unavailability of raw materials and market channels. There's also limited production and distribution capacities of businesses in these 4 countries. And while we have agriculture and fishery production capacity, most people that are engaged in these sectors primarily do for domestic or personal subsistence. So women also, if you look at the 4 countries who are engaged in business, are predominantly in the informal economy, and they're mostly they mostly look at competing care work responsibilities. So the second material barrier, as I mentioned, looks at access to finance. Again, in the 4 countries, we have relatively weak financial institutions, and so predominantly cash economies, and there's really no microfinance institutions or MFIs. Microlending facilities are not really present. So with this, there has been minimal availability of access to credit or loans to business capital. And also, if there are loans are usually acquired from, say, family members. They're often unregulated, and they have high interest rates. And the last barrier to women economic empowerment that I will cover today is the relational barriers. And when we say relational barriers, we're really looking at built-in cultural divides or barriers, really stemming from gender biases, norms, inherent stereotypes and prejudices that really persist through tradition and also socializations. Now, with these barriers, as we know, they confine certain groups, such as women, especially to socially and culturally accepted roles. Under this relational barriers, there are 2 major things we're looking at here. And these really surface during the stakeholder mapping for BELUU. And those 2 major barriers include the sexual and the reproductive health and gender-based violence. So for the sexual and reproductive health barrier, again, the stakeholder mapping found that in the 4 countries, we have unmet need for contraception, really that hinders women economic empowerment. This means that maternal and child health care are huge, other issues. So maternal and child health, but as well as teenage pregnancy, these really remain some of the high priority issues we face. Women living in poverty, they predominantly lack access to sexual and reproductive health. And also these are found commonly in single mothers, teenage mothers, and or out-of-school youth. And finally, gender-based violence. This is another major relational barrier, not just found within the 4 countries, but in the Pacific region. So intimate partner violence, or IPV, is significantly high across all Pacific region, and it really remains a taboo issue amongst these countries, and mostly due to cultural and social norms that really prevent women from reporting and seeking help from formal services as well as the authorities. So relational barriers really show how sexual and reproductive health as well as GBV remain major risk factors, not only to women's health and well-being in the Pacific region and the 4 countries, but also to their economic participation and security. So now that we've explored the various barriers to women economic empowerment, I will call on Kat to share some recommendations for addressing as well as mitigating the barriers to we. Kamal Tada.
Thank you so much, Maytaka. Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina Guanyo, and I'm Program Specialist for Bankers Without Borders in Grameen. So as we move forward, the BELUU program provides recommendations for bridging the gaps in the economic sectors and championing women's leadership and participation. Circling back to the four BELUU economic sectors. Next slide, please. Again, these are the four BELUU economic sectors. The stakeholder mapping report provides concrete recommendations on how MSMEs, associations of NGOs and chambers of commerce, governments, the academe, and international partners and donors, those five stakeholders can contribute to harnessing each sector and promoting WE. But for the purposes of this discussion, we will provide the general recommendations per sector. Next, please. So, in the fisheries sector, women's roles and contributions are often left unseen and considered unspecialized. This results in uncounted, undercompensated, or even unpaid work. Women in the sector should be able to gain access to finance, aquaculture training, and supportive networks to penetrate larger markets for trade and specialization. In doing so, there is a need to increase the institutional capacity of fisheries agencies in the countries to provide better services to the sector. Overall, the fisheries sector should be equipped with the practices and frameworks to protect and manage its natural resources while increasing the agricultural or fisheries production, including through the production in fish farms. In relation to WE, the fisheries sector has an immense opportunity for growth when provided with marketing, processing, and storage facilities, such as through community fisheries centers. In terms of agriculture, women's activities have been primarily intended for household subsistence. This means that they are unable to leverage the agricultural sector to increase their household income and their economic productivity. The findings of the BELUU stakeholder mapping recommend increasing investments in agriculture by enhancing production and expanding market channels, especially for major agricultural products such as coconut and taro. We also recommend adopting land use management systems such as agroforestry, which may integrate crop production with livestock. Additionally, it is imperative to support smallholder farmers, including those engaged in home or backyard gardening. Ultimately, there is a need to increase the capacities of women and their communities in business strategies through agribusiness trainings from NGOs, infrastructure and marketing support from government, research and extension work of the academy, and financial aid from international donors and partners. The third BELUU sector is the green business and circular economy, two concepts often tied to clean energy. Transitioning to renewable energy supports WE as the sector is projected to employ more women, especially in the Pacific region, compared to the oil and gas industry. The employment and economic potentials of green business through clean energy should be a key priority, especially for governments to consider transitioning to renewable energy sources. This can be done through increasing public investments, attracting private funding, and channeling international aid to renewable energy sources from biomass, wind, and marine energy in the four countries covered by BELUU. Other than energy transition, green business and circular economy are also achieved through proper waste management, specifically waste reduction and upcycling or recycling of materials. The business sector, especially women-owned and women-run enterprises, should be provided with the training, resources, and even incentives to apply the principles of circular economy in their production and throughout their supply chain management. Finally, in the four economic sectors, the tourism and ecotourism sector has significant potentials given that the four BELUU countries are rich in natural beauty, culture, and history. Stimulus recovery programs are imperative to boost or rebuild the tourism industry with sustainability and resilience for post-COVID-19 recovery. But evidently, the remoteness of the countries is a challenge to this sector. The tourism industry is a major driver for WE, as women make up the majority of the tourism workforce, but many remain in the lowest paid jobs or even in unpaid work in family-owned businesses. Thus, to boost this sector, it is imperative that we conduct comprehensive market research on tourism and strengthen the tourism policy, regulatory environment, and strategy. Tourism-related businesses can explore strengthening their social media marketing strategies, adopting digital transformation through smart hotels and digital payments, and increasing the capacities of the tourism workforce in customer service and hospitality management. Likewise, governments, the private sector, and the international partners and donors can funnel investments into infrastructures such as airports, roads, souvenir markets, leisure facilities, and heritage sites. The BELUU Stakeholder Mapping Report also provides recommendations for championing women's leadership and participation while creating an enabling environment where the legal landscape addresses systemic marginalization of women, girls, youth, and also PWDs. Thus, BELUU recommends first, ensuring women's labor force participation, second, investing in women in business, third, increasing women's access to finance, fourth, improving database decisions about WE, and five, channeling financial mechanisms in WE. Now, to champion women's leadership and participation, it is imperative to increase their visibility and meaningful participation both in the private and public sectors. It is also crucial to address and advocate gender equality issues such as access to sexual and reproductive health, prevention of gender-based violence, and the distribution of care work. Finally, it is high time to ensure access to education and employment, which are both determinants of lower teenage pregnancy. We recognize that when women are educated, they make better choices for their sexual and reproductive health, they engage in employment and entrepreneurship, and they become more economically independent and productive. Now, while BELUU has high hopes for harnessing WE in Marshall Islands, Palau, Nauru, and Tuvalu, our work requires a whole-of-society approach. As such, BELUU recommends continuous campaigning to ensure commitments to gender equality both at the international and national levels, monitor the implementation of national gender mainstreaming policies, collect sex disaggregated data, and mobilize resources on gender-responsive and gender-related initiatives. At the end of the day, we must work hand in hand with you, our stakeholders, in increasing awareness of women's issues and influencing concrete actions for women's economic empowerment, especially in the blue and green economies in the Pacific region. Thank you for being attentive. I'll hand over the mic back to Erin.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you to the BELUU team. At this point, we hope to hear from our panel reactors. Brigitte Ledoux of the Pacific Women Lead Enabling Services, Vivian Foster of Netball Fiji, and Sally Tietong Solablay of Globus Trading Company. Let's start with Brigitte.
Good morning, good afternoon, and talofa, because I'm talking from Tuvalu. I'm based in Tuvalu. I'm a gender equality and social inclusion advisor. I'm based in the gender affairs department, but also provide technical support to other departments and the civil society organization. And also I'm part of the Pacific Women Lead Enabling Services. So thank you very much for the Grameen Foundation for inviting me to be a reactor, like you said. I like that. Mapping is an interesting piece of work and highlight concrete issues experienced in the Pacific small island development states for women entrepreneurs. I found the report use a comprehensive approach to assess challenges and opportunity. And I appreciated that the mapping look into dimension of sexual and reproductive health and gender-based violence, which are often overlooked in that kind of project. When we talk about women's economic empowerment, we too often mainly focus only on the business side of it. But in a person's life, all of it is linked. We cannot separate it. It's not like now you do business and now you do leadership and it's all together. I also appreciate that in the presentation today, what was mentioned was the invisibility of women's contribution in agriculture, in fisheries and other activity, because it's a major issue. Even women themselves consider that they are helpers. People see women as helpers. They help their husband, they help the family, but they don't recognize that actually they play a critical role, and they have specialized knowledge and skills for that. So I think we keep on having to do that in national surveys or even in baseline surveys to really make visible women's contribution in those sectors. Of course, the report talk about the land access and control. This is a universal issue. I mean, everywhere in the world is an issue for women, almost everywhere. And I don't think that we can solve this issue within the project, but we need to take that into account, of course. But on the other hand, I think that the digital economy provides opportunity for women to sell and their product and service online, to identify new economic opportunity that don't necessarily require land to for that. However, when we talk about digital economy, which we cannot not talk about it, it's part of our life, whether we want it or not, and many small island states are behind in their capacity to use these opportunity and this technology. It remains that it's very expensive in small island states. I think people don't realize, if you've never been to Tuvalu, you don't know how much it costs. And it's not reliable on the top of it. So for an organization or an entrepreneur to invest in e-commerce, it has to be profitable. Otherwise, yeah, that's a challenge. So I think that the BELUU project can play an important role in supporting strategies to continue developing traditional activities like handicraft production, but in a modern and digital economy. So we know in the 4 countries where the project is being implemented, and I know more about RMI and Tuvalu. Handicraft is part of the budget of the, it feeds families. But one thing that I found interesting is that in the Marshall Islands, women express concern that we confine them in weaving only. And so, especially for young women, this is also a concern. Women can do something else than handicraft, but handicraft is itself, it's part of the cultural industry. And I think that if we shift even our language to talk about cultural industry instead of handicraft, handicraft looks like small activities that women can do to get busy. But thank you. So now one aspect that requires further attention is the market development. We can support the development of activity, build business training and skills development. But what is missing, and especially in the small island states where the population is small, so the market is small as well, is where people can sell their product. And should we invest in activity where there's no market? That's the other question. And then I want to finish with one dimension that has not been analyzed enough in the project, is women's role in their community. So I know that traditionally we look at women in the workplace and women in the house, but in the Pacific, women in the community, it's a third, and it's a very big undertaking for Pacific women. They play a critical role and they cannot get away from it. And it's also very expensive. So we need to look at the high level of women's responsibility in their community. It can be a barrier, but it can also be an opportunity. So I think that it's really going to be helping women to apply the best practices in business management within the context of their family and community. We cannot overlook that. That's not possible. So that's why I think that's something that the BELUU project should really pay attention to. And like I said, not just only seeing it as a barrier, but also as opportunity. So thank you very much to the BELUU team. I commend the project effort and insight, and the insight generated from the stakeholder mapping report. And
Thanks, Brigitte, for your feedback on the stakeholder mapping report. And definitely, there's more to be discovered regarding Pacific Island women's role in their community. And now, let's hear from Vivian.
Thank you so much. Mulavinaka, everybody. I'm Vivian Costa. I'm based in Fiji. And while I am part of Netball Fiji, I also have worked in the youth and development space for the longest time. And so in terms of this this report or the mapping exercise, what really resonated with me was the information around teenage pregnancies and young people, in particular, access to sexual health and sexual reproductive health and rights information. As the report found, with Marshall Islands, Nauru, and Tuvalu, they have incredibly young populations. And this is, generally speaking, this is the case across the region. And this in turn has impacts on current and future, or implications rather, on current and future access to health services and to education. So in terms of youth development, or in terms of young people, the access to sexual reproductive health and rights information, the access to contraception, and importantly, the access to stigma-free health services are key issues. In previous work I've done, young people have shared that they've experienced refusal of service because of perceptions that they are too young, or that they are too young to have sex, or they're doing something quite taboo. And then also we've had instances where young people have attempted to access contraception and have had public scoldings in pharmacies. And this, when you think about the high teenage pregnancy rates and therefore the high rates of young women with children who have the burden of childcare, these are all areas of concern. The other part of the research that resonated was the information around gender-based violence. And again, in terms of its impacts on young people in general, but young women in particular. So research has shown that GBV is learned behavior, but it can also be, of course, unlearned through education. And so for young people or young women, the impacts of GBV on their emotional and mental health and on their decision-making regarding their own intimate partners can be quite severe. And I think there's opportunity, which is recognized really in the report. There's opportunity to provide information, to provide empowerment, advocacy, to provide ways to access health, education, and economic services. And a lot of times it's actually that. It's the services are available, but people do not know how to actually access them. And so providing that link or that bridge to access is important. I was asked to make some reference to the socio-civic space. And I think that the mapping research shows that women, whether young or not, are always interested in contributing to the economic well-being of their families. And then while this might be from a gendered space or gender, it's really related to their gendered roles. It's also just as human beings and as personal sense of worth that they'd like to contribute to their families. And therefore, they are interested in employment opportunities and enterprise building. And Brigitte made reference to Marshall Islands and traditional crafts. Absolutely, it's the Marshallese traditional crafts are incredible, but what other opportunities are there that cannot be the only thing that's available to young women, especially when there are already women in the space, older women in the space. What then is the space for younger women to enter into that opportunity? The research also showed that there's a number of hindrances that prevent women and young women in particular pursuing their interests or pursuing their economic opportunities. And I think a big one, and again, Brigitte mentioned this, is the burden of domestic and care work. And we talk a lot about the care work of children. In the Pacific, it's also the care work of the elderly. And this is part of that community participation or community contribution that women make, that the burden of both looking after children and looking after the elderly generally falls on women. And in a lot of families, that burden will actually fall on a young woman, where it becomes her role and her responsibility, and sometimes to the detriment of her education. So she's stopped from going to school because she needs to look after an elderly person, for example. And so I think that's definitely a hindrance to pursuing opportunities. And of course, as we already know, the impact of gender-based violence on the physical and mental well-being of women definitely is a hindrance. But I think that there are ways around this. The fact that, for example, this opportunity, the community of practice model that Grameen is using, the opportunity to learn from others, the opportunity to gather information, gather ways in which you can do something better, I think is an important way of overcoming some of the barriers. I also think that empowerment and advocacy workshopping, and these two things are related to community practice also, that if you don't know how to do something, what may seem simple to others, if you don't know how to do it, if you don't know how to access the information that's available, you don't know how to access the service that is available, then you're not going to do it. And so sometimes it's as basic as an empowerment and advocacy workshop that provides you with that skill and that information. And then, of course, the access to finance and employment enterprise or enterprise opportunities as recommended in the report are important. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for your insights on increasing women's access to health services and education, empowerment and relationship, as well as their participation in social civic activities. Last but not least, let us hear from Sally.
Good morning. My name is Sally from Tuvalu, and I'm a very recent business entrepreneur in Palau. I feel very privileged to be a panelist for this webinar. I enjoyed the talks that Vivian and Bridget just completed. Those issues are also issues found in Palau. Prior to becoming a business person, I worked in the public sector. I worked at the Ministry of Finance for a number of years, and then decided one day I needed to contribute more to my community, and I didn't want to be tied down to a 9-to-5 job, or an 8-to-5 job as it is here. Starting a business was tough, meeting new people, making new contacts, sourcing vendors, even finding a physical place for my business was tough. It took me a couple of years before I officially had a storefront and before I officially was able to hire staff and bring in products to my business. I wish at that time that I'd had some kind of mentorship from other women entrepreneurs, people I could access for information on how to do business as a woman. And because of that, I started branching out into going into community works with my local communities. So now I'm a member of several women's community groups. I'm also a member of the BELUU Association of NGOs, and I'm on the advisory board for gender-based violence, which would not have been possible if I was still working in the public sector. There would be no time for it. So my BELUU resonates with me, especially we, because I think that many women in Palau have not been sufficiently empowered enough to in the socio-economic sense, to support their families and other communities to the best of their abilities. I believe that women in Palau must be more involved in policy-making decisions. And funnily enough, for someone who was not involved in politics, I believe that women need to seek representation at the state and national levels to advocate for policies that support women's economic empowerment. This would include incentives for businesses owned by women and measures to reduce gender-based barriers in the workforce. I believe in establishing a mentorship program for women by women. That would be a powerful enabling mechanism to the economic success of women in general. I believe that connecting successful women entrepreneurs with those women seeking guidance would create a supportive network for sharing experiences, advice, problem solving. And on that same line of thought, as mentors and advisors, women entrepreneurs can foster a sense of community by organizing regular meetings, networking events, and mini forums for women to connect, share ideas, and support each other. I believe that an obstacle that is not unique to Palau, but also to other Pacific Island countries, is the access to microfinance mechanisms for women. I believe that the Palau National Development Bank has the opportunity to create accessible financial products and services, such as microloans and saving accounts, specifically designed for women with medium, small, or casual enterprises. Advocacy at the state and national levels can change policies and laws to include enabling programs such as microfinancing for women and other mechanisms that will allow them to succeed in the local economy. I would wish for women in Palau and in the Pacific to have access to training programs that focus on essential business skills, from basic financial literacy to advanced entrepreneurial strategies. In an ideal world, women would have access to workshops or training sessions that address challenges unique to women entrepreneurs. These opportunities would foster resilience and provide tools to overcome obstacles in the business world. Finally, I just became aware of a business incubator that's actually in Palau. This is founded by a fellow woman business entrepreneur, Ms. Irene Angeline, and she's associated with the Palau Entrepreneurs for Growth, and they are one of the sources, they're an institutional source on the deeper platform for BELUU. So I totally endorse the setup of such business incubators in our local communities, where women can access technological resources that are not readily available at home. I strongly believe that business incubators can enable women in their communities to leverage digital resources for marketing, financial management, accessing broader markets. Such incubators can be tailored to the specific needs and aspirations of the women in the communities for their needs. These incubators can include such mundane things as office equipment, computers, printers, access to the internet. These tools can help women and empower women to build and scale their businesses. So I thank you for the opportunity to be a panelist for the We Champion We webinar and for championing women's economic empowerment in the Pacific Island countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally. Those are really valuable inputs for mitigating challenges as we move along with the implementation of the Innovation Grant projects. Once again, thank you to our panel reactors. Let's give a virtual round of applause to Brigitte, Vivian, and Sally. Now we welcome your questions. Some of your questions have already been answered by our team. We've received a question from Shuri Chibana. As seen in the presentation, Palau continues to be an outlier based on the results of the mapping report in terms of education, population, age, etc. Why do we think this is the case? Gaps or absences in disaggregated data continues to be a barrier. What should we be doing to help bridge this gap? Would any of the panelists have an answer? Thank you.
Hi, Erin. I'll respond to Shuri's question. I think this is the first part of her question. So this is a very difficult question as to why Palau is an outlier based on the results of the mapping report. As you can see, for example, in terms of we highlighted that in terms of the economic sectors, particularly in tourism, Palau is the only country among the 4 BELUU countries covered with a robust tourism sector. It's also relatively advanced towards preventing or lowering the cases of adolescent fertility. I think this is something that we are definitely sort of unable to explicitly surface from the results of the mapping exercise. And I invite my colleagues in Grameen and also my colleagues from from Palau to pitch in on their thoughts. But I think one of the reasons could be among the four countries, Palau is situated in a different geographical space. Although the four countries do share some history, some cultures and values, Palau has for one, it's similar to Marshall Islands. It has COFA with the US. There are a lot of businesses also in Palau. But it's quite hard to point out what specific factor could have shaped how Palau turns out to be an outlier in some of this in terms of in terms of education, in population, and also in terms of the industry. That's something that it's necessary to further do a more comprehensive comparative analysis, and maybe a mapping report will not be sufficient to to provide an in-depth analysis to respond to that question. So we really find it challenging to respond to that. But that's something that could be an interesting perspective to explore, and see how Palau could be, how we can refer to Palau, and also how Palau can learn from other countries, advancing in other aspects as well. So Weber or the rest of the team, if you have any question or if you have any additional insights, I know that I can see Bridget raising her hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to answer about the statistic gap. So it's true that we're much more advanced in Palau than in other Pacific Island country, in the small island states. You would think that a small population, it should be easier to keep statistics and have sex disaggregated data, but it's not the case. One issue is that we depend a lot on national survey. National survey are very expensive, and they happen every 5 to 10 years. So we kind of have to wait to get those data. Then I don't understand myself why in the world we still have to advocate for having sex disaggregated data in everything. Still don't understand why it's like that, but it is. And then they've been initiative in the region, in the Pacific region with SPC to build capacity to conduct gender statistics. However, there's a very high staff turnover as well in the small island states. People migrate a lot, change jobs. So these are things that we have to do again and again and again. And I would say also that maybe the difference with Palau as well is that many of the activities that people are involved in, that's why I was talking about the community dimension earlier, it's happening in informal setting. It's not based on cash economy. So it's invisible again. So in Tuvalu, if you want to have vegetable from the outer island, there's nobody selling it. You send a bottle of whiskey and a cousin is going to send you a bunch of coconut. So you have no way to count this. Jobs is the same thing, and it's not just for women, also men. If you're not working for the government, there's no private sector really in Tuvalu, so you're likely to work on a day wage basis. So again, it's not there's no accountability about that. So I think that to answer to your question about the sex disaggregated data, I think that it's a challenge. In any type of study that you do in the region, we're still fighting for that. And earlier this morning, we just launched the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Information Hub in Tuvalu that is managed by the Gender Affairs Department. And it's the idea to make accessible information analysis report done that can help us to do better gender analysis and accessing information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brigitte and Katrina. We've also received another question. Hi, how does mapping include time poverty and gender-responsive budgeting to address women's pursuit of economic equity? Thank you.
Hello. So in terms of so I for the mapping report, in terms of the time poverty, I think this is extensively discussed when we it will be extensively discussed, albeit not explicitly using the term time poverty, but we have a lot of discussion on the distribution of care work. One of the as we shared in the results of the mapping report, one of the challenges for women is that women tend to work for subsistence, but they also they also have competing care work responsibilities. So in terms of this is very crucial in terms of time poverty, because as women have these competing care work responsibilities, and they have the double burden of care work due to the some concerns when it comes to the gender distribution of care work. This affects women's economic activities and their ability to participate in meaningful economic activities. And so the mapping report will share how the competing care work responsibilities hinders or serves as a barrier to we specifically discussed under the material barriers discussed. I think this was discussed by Shinoy, where the limited business sector and market channels, one of the challenges there is competing care work. That's because and it is mainly attributed to the lack of a business space for women. Most of the women would facilitate or operate their business in their household, and so there is competing care work. And when there's competing care work, they tend to focus on their care responsibilities rather than work on their enterprises. So and then for in terms of to address maybe the gender responsive budgeting in relation to women's pursuit of economic equity, I think Weber would like to pitch in on this one.
Hi, Cam. So thank you for that question. Before I get there, I'd just like to add some more based on Shrudi's question earlier, just because it's quite a compact question that was. It was a two-parter. So first to address, I believe the gaps and absences in sex disaggregated data, that's really sort of at the core in a lot of the questions being asked. So we are looking at a place where it is really the government who is doing the most data collection that they're doing, or collecting the most data on it, and they're simply not doing it. And I'm referencing Palau specifically because I am the other WE consultant for Palau, and it's been a struggle on the part of nonprofit organizations and CSOs to advocate for more sex disaggregated data on the national level. Because by really knowing where are the gaps, that's where they can be addressed. And I think that also comes back to the question being asked by the anonymous attendee about how the mapping report might be used to address gender responsive budgeting. I think it shows where the gaps are in the Republic of Palau and other nations, and where the government, or where government needs to step in. Overall, I think it was a barrier for the mapping report, and we've seen really across the board for any WE work in the Pacific, is the lack of data. And in order for us to create the budgets that are responsive to gender issues, then we need to have data to back that up. It's not enough that we know that there's an issue with gender in terms of economics. But where is that? How many women own businesses in Palau compared to men? That's information that we simply don't have and that we don't have access to, but is easily accessible if the government looks for it. And by doing that, we can actually create solutions, meaningful solutions to address those gaps. Gender responsive budgeting is a relatively new term, and I know for a fact that Sally has some experience with it because it's been an interest for BELUU Association of NGOs and the Pacific Islands Association of NGOs regarding how our government using the budget to help the citizens. And so, if anything, I would also like to ask Sally if it's something that she can speak to.
Okay, can you hear me? What the Bamboo is doing right now is we're formulating a citizens budget guide for Palau with the emphasis on gender-based violence. We got this grant through the VAFA Pacific Hub project, which was funded by the UNDP. And we felt there was a need for this kind of work in Palau, not only to provide the common person with the ability to understand what happens in the budget, but also to know what the budget components are in layman's terms, not just in a dry, I would say a dry kind of language. So this is what we're doing now. We're trying to access a lot of information groups, and in the process, which happened last week, I found out because I was trying to make an appointment with the Office on Gender, and I was told that yes, there is an Office on Gender. It is under a new ministry. It has no staff and it does nothing. So it seems like that, where you assume that there is an entity that does do works for this the facet of the community, to find out it doesn't exist because of lack of funding, even though on paper it exists. It was a bit of a letdown. So we are pursuing other resources in order to complete the citizens budget guide, and we hope to have that out sometime around mid-2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally and Weber, as well as Katrina, for your insights on these questions. This has been a very productive discussion. And now, to officially close the webinar, may I call on the Regional Director for Asia Pacific of Grameen Foundation, Christine Bilag. Christine, the virtual floor is yours.
First of all, I wish to thank each and everyone who participated, especially the panelists who shared their insights and time with us today. As we all know, it's really a challenging time across the globe, not just in the Pacific, but really across the globe. And I know that for those who are part of this webinars, just being part of here and listening to the stories, it's really one way to understand what is happening on the ground. And I hope that this does not also stop you, but rather inspire you to continue doing your work in your own positive spheres of participation in your traditional groups, entrepreneurial spaces, and we hope that this inspires you to do more collaborative efforts We thank the organizations and individuals who are also part of the mapping exercise. This was not an easy feat, and it was also very rewarding for us to hear stories directly from both men and women. And this officially really launches this webinar officially launches our stakeholder mapping report. May this serve as a guide and provide, again, further insight to the current environment and situation in the Pacific. Participants of this webinar will be able to get a copy of our published report, and this will also be available for easy downloading and sharing in our Grameen Foundation website. We'd like to invite each one to share this within your networks, whether they are the youth, women traditional groups, Chamber of Commerce, and entrepreneurs, and spark that conversation. I hope that this sparks conversation within your own groups to learn not only about their countries but other participating countries of BELUU. On a personal note, I really wish to thank the participants of our innovation grants who were really brave enough to put together a proposal and put forward a project for us to support and to support also the communities that they wish to serve. And I hope to close by providing just a simple statement. If you're feeling nervous, if you're feeling quite lost or uninspired, just remember to take a step and begin. So begin, be involved in the conversations for both men and women. Make sure that you're involved in your community spaces, in school, in academia, or whatever background you're part of. Engage both the young and old in the conversation. It's both trying to partake that knowledge and share that knowledge to a next generation. It's really important to turn over that legacy and that part of work and try to make sustainability pathways for your own institutions. Give back to the community. It's always inspiring if you find other people that are aligned to your objectives and goals. I inspire others with the work that you do. Always serve with excellence and relevance in mind, and never stop learning something new. There's always going to be an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to mentor a new group or a new generation of women and young entrepreneurs. So begin. And if you wish to learn more about the BELUU program and objectives, you may reach out to us. We would love to hear about your story and provide an introductory session about the BELUU program. We remain very excited to explore new partnerships. So join us in our mission, and as we continue to promote women entrepreneurship and empowerment and financial inclusion within the region. So thank you everyone who participated in our mapping exercise and of course our webinar session today. Back to you, Erin.
Thank you, Christine, for your powerful closing remarks and for officially launching the BELUU Stakeholder Mapping Report. You can download the report and join our community of practice through Grameen's website at grameenfoundation.org. And you may also scan the QR codes on your screen to download or check the links that we sent through the chat box. On behalf of the BELUU team, our donors and stakeholders, thank you everyone for joining us in the stakeholder mapping, in the webinar and the official launch of the BELUU Stakeholder Mapping Report. Please anticipate an email from the BELUU team with a shared recording of the webinar, a link to the mapping report, as well as a short survey that we hope all participants can complete. Stay tuned for updates and information about our next learning session. You may also send us an email at beluu@grameenfoundation.org. Have a good rest of your day, everyone, and take care. Salamat, sulang, komol, pagkapatay, tubokor.